The fluorescent lights hummed above the Pentagon briefing room as General Marcus Ravencroft's voice cut through the morning stillness like a blade through silk. His words came fast, clipped, in what sounded like a dialect none of the assembled officers recognized. The room fell into confused silence. Colonels exchanged glances. Majors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. The general's face reddened as he repeated the command, his voice rising with frustration. Near the back wall, barely visible among the shadows, stood a figure in janitor's coveralls. Weathered hands gripped a mop handle, knuckles white against brown skin. The woman had been invisible to everyone in that room for months, just another piece of the background machinery that kept the Pentagon running. But as the general's strange words echoed off the polished walls, something extraordinary happened. Her spine straightened like a steel rod. The mop clattered to the floor. Her right hand snapped up in a perfect military salute, crisp and precise, while her left found the small of her back in textbook attention position. Her voice rang out clear and strong. "Sir, yes, sir. Understood, General. Requesting permission to speak freely about tactical deployment parameters." The room erupted into chaos. Officers spun in their chairs. The general's jaw dropped. Security personnel moved toward their weapons. But the woman remained frozen in that perfect salute, her dark eyes locked on Ravencroft's face with an intensity that could melt armor plating. "Who the hell are you?" Ravencroft demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Chief Warrant Officer Zara Mikhailova, sir. Retired. Or so I thought." Her accent carried traces of something Eastern European, something that had been carefully scrubbed away by years of American military service. "You just issued a tactical order in Chechen, sir, specifically requesting immediate air support for a downed reconnaissance team in hostile territory." The silence that followed was deafening. Ravencroft's face went pale. The assembled officers stared at this cleaning woman who had just demonstrated knowledge of a classified language protocol that fewer than 12 people in the entire U.S. military were supposed to understand. "That's impossible," Colonel Henderson muttered from the front row. "That protocol was classified above top secret. How could she?" "Because," Ravencroft interrupted, his eyes never leaving Zara's face, "she helped write it." He paused, studying her features with growing recognition. "Jesus Christ, Wraith, is that really you?" The woman's salute never wavered, but something flickered behind her eyes. Pain, pride, the weight of secrets that had been buried so deep they'd fossilized into bone. "Yes, sir, General, Wraith reporting for duty." The mop lay forgotten on the polished floor, a symbol of the life she'd been living. But symbols, like identities, could be abandoned when duty called. 3 hours later, the briefing room had been cleared of everyone except Ravencroft and Zara. Coffee cups sat cooling between them on the mahogany table. The general's uniform jacket hung on the back of his chair, his shirt sleeves rolled up like a man preparing for surgery. Zara had traded her coveralls for borrowed BDUs that hung loose on her small frame, but she wore them with the easy confidence of someone who had never truly left the service. 15 years, Ravencroft said, shaking his head. 15 goddamn years you've been pushing a mop around this place, and nobody knew." "Nobody was supposed to know," Zara replied, her fingers drumming against the ceramic mug. "That was the point of the extraction protocol. New identity, civilian life, pension under an assumed name. Standard operating procedure for burn notice cases." "Burn notice?" The general's voice carried a bitter edge. "That's what they called it when they hung you out to dry in Kandahar." Zara's hand stilled on the mug. Her eyes found the window, where gray Washington clouds gathered like old ghosts. "I flew 73 combat missions, sir. Saved more lives than I care to count. But one mission goes sideways, one bad intelligence report, and suddenly I'm a security risk." "The congressional hearing was closed session," Ravencroft said quietly. "I read the transcripts. They blamed you for the ambush at Firebase Juliet. Said your reconnaissance flight patterns had been compromised by enemy signals intelligence." "My patterns weren't compromised." Her voice was steady, but her knuckles had gone white again. "Someone in the intelligence chain was feeding information to the Taliban. I had proof. Names, dates, transmission logs. but proving it would have exposed how deep the corruption went. Ravencroft leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking like old bones. So they buried you instead. Easier to sacrifice one pilot than admit the intelligence apparatus had been penetrated. Wraith died that day, Zara said, along with 12 good soldiers who trusted bad intelligence. Zara Mikhailova, janitor, was born from those ashes. The general studied her face, nodding the lines that hadn't been there 15 years ago, the gray threading through her dark hair. But her eyes remained sharp, predatory. The eyes of someone who had seen death from 30,000 feet and never flinched. "We need Wraith back," he said finally. "The situation in Eastern Europe has deteriorated beyond anything the public knows. Russian forces are massing near the Romanian border. Our satellite intelligence is being jammed. We need someone who can fly deep reconnaissance missions in contested airspace." "I'm 52 years old, sir. My reflexes aren't what they were." "Your reflexes just identified a classified Chechen tactical protocol from across a crowded room," Ravencroft countered. "Your brain is still the most dangerous weapon in this building." The walk from the Pentagon to the secure motor pool felt like a journey between worlds. Zara's borrowed boots echoed against concrete as she followed Ravencroft through corridors she had mopped 1,000 times. But now the familiar walls seemed different, charged with possibility and dread in equal measure. "The aircraft is stationed at Andrews," Ravencroft explained, his voice low despite the empty hallway. "Modified F-35 Lightning II. Stealth capabilities enhanced beyond standard specifications. Long-range fuel capacity. Electronic warfare suite that didn't exist when you were last in the cockpit." "The Lightning," Zara murmured. "I read about them in Aviation Weekly. Never thought I'd see one up close." "You'll be seeing one from the inside. Flight certification starts tomorrow. We're running short on time." They reached the motor pool where a black sedan waited, engine running. The driver was young, maybe 25, with the easy confidence of someone who had never seen real combat. He held the rear door open with military precision. "This is Lieutenant Casey Morrison," Ravencroft said as they settled into the leather seats. "He'll be your liaison during the certification process. Former Air Force Academy, top of his class in aeronautical engineering." Morrison's eyes met Zara's in the rearview mirror. She could see the questions there, the barely concealed skepticism. To him, she was just another middle-aged woman being given a chance she probably didn't deserve. The thought amused her more than it should have. "Ma'am," Morrison said politely, "I've reviewed your service record, quite impressive for someone from your era." "Your era?" The phrase hung in the air like a challenge. Zara felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest, a familiar weight she hadn't carried in 15 years. It was the feeling of being underestimated, of having people look at her and see only what they expected to see. "My era," she repeated, her voice neutral. "And what era would that be, Lieutenant?" Morrison's eyes flickered uncertainty. "I just meant, the technology has advanced significantly since then. Modern aircraft require different skill sets, more computer literacy, systems integration, multitasking capabilities." "Multitasking," Zara said, almost to herself. She turned to look out the window as the sedan pulled into traffic. "Tell me, Lieutenant, have you ever flown in contested airspace?" "Well, no, ma'am, but the simulators." "Have you ever had surface-to-air missiles tracking your aircraft while coordinating close air support for troops in contact?" "The training scenarios cover those situations extensively." Zara nodded slowly. Training scenarios. She remembered being 25, remembered the absolute confidence that came from never having been truly tested. It wasn't Morrison's fault. The world had been quiet during his formative years. Andrews Air Force Base materialized through the Virginia afternoon like a city of steel and purpose. The sedan passed through 3 security checkpoints before reaching the classified aircraft hangar. Each checkpoint required biometric verification. Each guard seemed more serious than the last. By the time they reached the hangar doors, Zara felt the familiar weight of secrecy settling around her shoulders like an old coat. The hangar was cathedral vast, its ceiling disappearing into shadows above. But all of that faded into irrelevance when she saw the aircraft. The F-35 Lightning II crouched on the polished concrete like a predator at rest. Its angular surfaces seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, giving the machine an otherworldly quality. This wasn't the standard Lightning she'd read about in trade magazines. This aircraft had been modified in ways that spoke of black-budget projects and capabilities that didn't officially exist. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Morrison's voice carried genuine admiration. "Stealth coating is third-generation metamaterials, radar cross-sections smaller than a hummingbird. Electronic warfare suite can spoof enemy systems from 200 miles away." Zara approached the aircraft slowly, her eyes cataloging every detail. The weapon pylons were internal, hidden within the fuselage. The engine intake had been modified with some kind of noise-dampening technology. Most tellingly, the aircraft bore no national markings, no squadron insignia, nothing that would identify its origin if it were shot down over hostile territory. "Ghost," she whispered. "Ma'am," Morrison looked confused. "That's what I'd call her. Ghost." Zara reached out to touch the aircraft's skin, feeling the slight texture of the stealth coating beneath her fingertips. "She's built for operations that never happened, missions that don't exist." Ravencroft joined them beside the aircraft, his expression unreadable. "The certification process normally takes 6 months. We have 3 weeks." 3 weeks to learn an entirely new aircraft? Morrison looked skeptical. "General, with respect, that seems." "Impossible," Zara interrupted. She was still looking at the Lightning, but her mind was already racing through system configurations, performance parameters, tactical applications. "Tell me about the flight control software. Is it fully integrated with the electronic warfare systems?" Morrison blinked, clearly not expecting such a technical question. "Yes, ma'am. Full integration. The aircraft can automatically implement defensive measures while maintaining optimal flight characteristics." "And manual override." "Of course, but in combat situations, the computer systems are far more efficient." "Efficiency isn't everything, Lieutenant." Zara finally turned away from the aircraft to look at him directly. "Sometimes you need to do something stupid and human and completely illogical. Sometimes you need to break your own rules to win." She could see Morrison processing this, trying to reconcile her words with everything he'd been taught about modern aerial warfare. In his world, warfare was increasingly automated, sanitized, reduced to data streams and probability matrices. He had never needed to rely on instinct over instruments, never needed to trust his gut when all the computers were telling him he was wrong. The flight simulator occupied an entire room adjacent to the hangar, its sophisticated motion systems hidden beneath clean white panels. As Zara strapped herself into the pilot's seat, the familiar weight of a flight helmet settling on her head, 15 years seemed to collapse into nothing. Her hands found the controls with muscle memory that had never truly faded. "Initial system check," Morrison's voice crackled through the headset. He sat at a bank of monitors outside the simulator, tracking every aspect of her performance. "We'll start with basic flight characteristics, then progress to combat scenarios." The virtual world materialized around her with startling clarity. Rolling hills stretched to distant mountains, all rendered in perfect detail. The Lightning's engines spooled up with a sound that was felt more than heard, a deep thrumming that seemed to resonate in her bones. "Tower, this is Ghost 1 requesting permission for takeoff," she said into her microphone, falling back into radio protocols as naturally as breathing. "Ghost 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Proceed to Waypoint Alpha for initial handling characteristics evaluation." The virtual aircraft lifted off smoothly, climbing into simulated sky with power that took her breath away. The Lightning responded to her inputs with a precision that bordered on telepathic. Every control surface, every system seemed designed to amplify her intentions rather than simply obey them. "Impressive," Morrison's voice carried genuine surprise. "Your control inputs are remarkably smooth for someone who hasn't flown in 15 years." Zara banked the aircraft into a climbing turn, feeling the G-forces build through the simulator's motion system. Some things you never forget, Lieutenant. Flying is like falling in love. Once you know how, the knowledge stays in your bones. For the next 2 hours, she put the virtual lightning through its paces. High G turns, emergency procedures, weapons systems integration, electronic countermeasures. With each scenario, Morrison's commentary grew more respectful, his initial skepticism giving way to something approaching awe. Final scenario, Morrison announced. Surface-to-air threat environment, multiple bogies, friendly forces in distress. This is based on current intelligence from the Romanian border region. The peaceful countryside vanished, replaced by a landscape of smoke and fire. Warning tones filled the cockpit as enemy radar systems painted her aircraft. Below, she could see the distinctive heat signatures of armored vehicles moving through a river valley. Ghost 1, this is Viper 6. We're taking heavy fire from enemy positions, grid reference 442-337. Request immediate close air support. The voice was young, strained with fear and adrenaline. Someone's son, someone's future, calling for help from 30,000 feet above. Zara's hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, designating targets, coordinating with ground forces, managing threat warnings from multiple missile systems. But something was wrong. The tactical situation didn't make sense. Morrison, Zara's voice cut through the simulator's din. This scenario is wrong. Ma'am, the parameters are based on current intelligence estimates. No, she pulled the lightning into a sharp climb, breaking off from the attack run. The enemy positions are too well coordinated. The SAM sites are positioned to create overlapping fields of fire. This isn't a random engagement, it's a trap. Morrison's voice carried confusion and irritation. Ma'am, the scenario parameters require you to provide close air support to friendly forces. That's the mission objective. The mission objective will get me killed and won't save those soldiers. Zara banked hard left, climbing toward the cloud layer. Look at the tactical display. Really look at it. See how the enemy vehicles are positioned. They're herding our forces into a kill zone. Through her headset, she could hear Morrison conferring with someone else, voices too low to make out clearly. The simulator paused, holding her aircraft in a frozen moment above the virtual battlefield. Ma'am, Morrison's voice returned, more formal now. General Ravencroft would like to speak with you. The simulator powered down, virtual world fading to black. Zara pulled off her helmet, feeling sweat cool against her scalp. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing with the kind of adrenaline that only came from real danger, not simulated threats. Ravencroft entered the simulator bay looking grim. Explain. It's a classic L-shaped ambush, Zara said, pulling up the tactical display on the main monitor. Enemy forces positioned here and here, with SAM coverage designed to channel attacking aircraft into this corridor. Any pilot following standard close air support procedures would approach from the south, straight into a crossfire. The intelligence reports indicate scattered resistance forces, not coordinated military action. Then your intelligence is wrong, or 15 years old. She traced the enemy positions with her finger. This is Russian doctrine, textbook combined arms tactics. Whoever set up this engagement has been trained by Spetsnaz advisors. Morrison looked between them, clearly lost. But the friendly forces are requesting immediate support. We can't just abandon them. We're not abandoning them, Zara said patiently. We're keeping them alive. Sometimes the best way to help people is to not do what they're asking you to do. Ravencroft studied the tactical display for a long moment. What would you do? High-altitude approach from the northeast, using terrain masking to avoid the SAM envelope. Electronic warfare first, blind their targeting systems. Then precision strikes on the command vehicles, break up their coordination. Only after we've disrupted their command structure do we provide close air support. That approach would take 40 minutes longer than direct engagement. Those soldiers have been fighting for their lives for months. They can hold out 40 more minutes. But if we fly into that trap, they'll be fighting alone forever. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics. Ravencroft's face revealed nothing, but Zara could see him processing her analysis, weighing tactical options against political pressures. "Run it again," Ravencroft ordered, "but this time use her approach." The simulator hummed back to life, virtual world reforming around Zara's aircraft. But now the tactical situation looked different to her eyes, patterns emerging from what had seemed like chaos. The enemy positions formed a clear picture when viewed from the right angle. "Ghost One, this is Viper 6. Situation critical. Where's that air support?" The voice in her headset was more desperate now, the simulation cranking up the emotional pressure. But Zara had learned long ago to compartmentalize, to hold human compassion separate from tactical necessity. "Viper 6, this is Ghost One. I need you to pull back to grid reference 438-340 and hold position. Air support inbound, but not in the way you're expecting." "Negative, Ghost One. We can't withdraw. Enemy forces will overrun our position." "Trust me, Viper 6. Sometimes you have to give ground to keep your life." She took the Lightning high and northeast, using a ridge line to mask her approach from enemy radar. The aircraft's electronic warfare systems began their work, sending out waves of jamming signals designed to blind and confuse hostile air defenses. Below, the tactical situation shifted as enemy units lost coordination. Command vehicles, suddenly cut off from their subordinate elements, became exposed and vulnerable. Zara marked each target with laser designation, building a complete picture of the enemy's command structure. "Beginning attack run," she announced, rolling the Lightning into a steep dive. "Multiple targets, precision strikes only." The virtual weapons found their marks with surgical accuracy. Command vehicles exploded in sequence, their destruction rippling through the enemy formation like dominoes falling. Without coordination, the sophisticated ambush collapsed into chaos. "Viper 6, this is Ghost One. Enemy command structure neutralized. You are cleared to advance and engage remaining scattered forces." "Ghost One, Viper 6. How did you know? Our intelligence showed nothing about organized resistance." Zara pulled the Lightning back into climbing flight, watching the tactical display as friendly forces advanced against now disorganized enemy units. "Sometimes you have to see the forest instead of the trees, Viper 6. Ghost One returning to base." The simulator powered down again, leaving her in sudden silence. When she emerged from the cockpit, Morrison was staring at performance metrics on his monitor, his expression somewhere between amazement and confusion. "Tactical efficiency rating 96%, he said quietly. "Mission success with 0 friendly casualties. That's better than our best test pilots." Ravencroft approached the simulator, his face thoughtful. "Where did you learn to read tactical situations like that?" "Kandahar," Zara replied simply. 15 years ago, when the intelligence was wrong and 12 good soldiers died because I trusted computers more than my instincts." The secure conference room in the Pentagon's basement felt like a tomb, windowless and heavy with the weight of classified secrets. Zara sat across from a panel of officers she didn't recognize, men and women with faces that revealed nothing and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance. "Ms. Mikhailova," the woman at the center of the panel began. Her uniform bore the insignia of Air Force Intelligence. "Your performance in the simulator was impressive, but we have concerns about your psychological profile." "My psychological profile?" Zara kept her voice level, professional. "I was evaluated fit for duty until the day I was discharged." "That was 15 years ago. Since then, you've been living under an assumed identity, working in a menial position, essentially in hiding. That kind of psychological displacement can have lasting effects." The man to the intelligence officers left opened a thick folder. "Dr. Marcus Webb, Air Force Psychology Division. I've reviewed your service records, including the classified portions. The incident at Firebase Juliet involved significant trauma. PTSD, survivors' guilt, authority issues stemming from perceived institutional betrayal." "Perceived betrayal?" Zara's voice carried a dangerous edge that made Ravencroft shift uncomfortably in his chair. 12 soldiers died because someone in the intelligence chain was feeding information to the Taliban. I had proof. I was told to keep quiet for the good of the mission. And yet you've spent 15 years in a civilian role without incident, Dr. Webb continued. No psychological episodes, no substance abuse, no behavioral problems. That level of emotional suppression is concerning. I prefer to think of it as emotional discipline. Tell me about your dreams, Webb said, leaning forward slightly. Do you dream about the incident at Firebase Juliet? The question hit like a physical blow, unexpected and brutal. Zara felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the weight of memories she had spent years learning to carry. Sometimes. Nightmares. Dreams, memories, same thing really. Do you blame yourself for those deaths? The room went silent. Zara could hear the whisper of air conditioning, the distant hum of electronics. Everyone was watching her, waiting for her answer. I blame the system that put those soldiers in danger, she said finally. I blame the intelligence officers who ignored evidence of corruption. I blame the politicians who decided one pilot was more expendable than admitting their own failures. But do you blame yourself? Every day. The words came out quieter than she intended. Every day for 15 years, but blame and responsibility are different things. I was responsible for those soldiers' lives while they were under my protection, but I wasn't responsible for the institutional failures that killed them. Dr. Webb made notes on a legal pad. And now you're being asked to return to that same system, to trust the same institutions that, by your own account, betrayed you before. The alternative is letting more soldiers die, while bureaucrats debate psychological profiles. The psychological evaluation continued for 3 hours, probing every aspect of her mental state with the kind of clinical precision that felt like psychological vivisection. When it was over, Zara sat alone in the conference room, staring at the wood grain of the table while voices argued in hushed tones outside the door. Morrison appeared with a cup of coffee and what might have been sympathy. Rough session. They want to make sure I'm not going to have a breakdown at 30,000 feet. She accepted the coffee gratefully, feeling the warmth seep through the ceramic mug into her cold hands. Can't say I blame them. For what it's worth, I think you're exactly what this mission needs. Morrison's voice carried a sincerity that surprised her. I've been flying for 8 years, mostly training missions and routine patrols. I've never seen anyone read a tactical situation the way you did in that simulator. You've never been in a real fight, Zara observed. That changes how you see everything. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we've gotten too comfortable, too dependent on technology and doctrine. Maybe we need someone who remembers what it feels like to be afraid. The conference room door opened, and Ravencroft entered alone. His expression was carefully neutral, the face of a man who had delivered both good news and bad news, often enough to perfect the art of revealing nothing. The psychological evaluation is complete, he said, settling into the chair across from her. Dr. Webb has concerns about your fitness for active duty. He recommends additional counseling and a graduated return to flight status. How long? 6 months minimum, possibly longer depending on your progress in therapy. Zara set down her coffee cup with deliberate care, and the mission timeline. 3 weeks, as originally stated. So we have a choice. Send someone else who doesn't understand the tactical situation, or send someone who might have PTSD but knows how to keep people alive. Ravencroft's smile was grim. That's exactly the choice we have, and I've already made it. From his jacket pocket, he produced a small leather case. Inside, nestled in blue velvet, was a set of pilot's wings. Not the standard Air Force wings she had worn 15 years ago, but something different. Black metal instead of silver, with subtle design elements that spoke of special operations and missions that didn't officially exist. Welcome back to active duty, Chief Warrant Officer Mikhailova. Your call sign is Ghost. She picked up the wings, feeling their weight in her palm. They were heavier than she remembered, dense with the weight of responsibility and expectation. Ghost, she repeated. I like it better than Wraith. The pre-dawn darkness at Andrews Air Force Base held a quality of anticipation, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Zara walked across the tarmac toward the hangar, her flight suit crisp and new, the black wings on her chest catching the glow of runway lights. It had been 3 days since her psychological evaluation, 3 days of intensive briefings on the situation in Eastern Europe, and she was finally going to fly the Lightning for real. Inside the hangar, the aircraft seemed different in the artificial light. More real somehow, as if the transition from simulator to actual flight gear had awakened something dormant in its systems. Ground crew moved around the machine with practiced efficiency, checking systems, loading ordnance, preparing Ghost for her first real mission. Final briefing, Morrison said, joining her beside the aircraft. His tablet showed satellite imagery of the target area, a section of Romanian countryside near the Ukrainian border where Russian forces had been massing for weeks. Intelligence indicates a possible arms depot in this valley. Your mission is reconnaissance only. Get in, get pictures, get out. Reconnaissance, Zara repeated, studying the imagery. What kind of arms depot requires stealth reconnaissance? The kind that officially doesn't exist. Ravencroft's voice came from behind them. The kind that, if it really is there, represents a significant escalation in Russian military preparations. She looked at the satellite photos more carefully, noting terrain features, potential threats, escape routes. The valley was narrow, surrounded by hills that would channel radar coverage and limit maneuvering room. If things went wrong, there would be few options for evasion. SAM coverage. Minimal, according to our intelligence. Morrison highlighted several positions on the map. S-300 systems here and here, but they're older generation. Your stealth capabilities should be sufficient to avoid detection. Should be. Zara's tone carried skepticism earned through experience. What about fighter patrols? Russian air presence has been limited to routine border patrols. Nothing that should pose a threat to a stealth aircraft. She nodded, but something nagged at her about the mission parameters. Reconnaissance missions didn't usually require the most advanced stealth fighter in the American inventory. A satellite could take pictures with better resolution and zero risk to personnel, unless the mission wasn't really about taking pictures. General, she said carefully, what aren't you telling me? Ravencroft exchanged a glance with Morrison, some silent communication passing between them. There may be American personnel in that valley, possibly prisoners, possibly defectors. We need eyes on the ground to determine their status. Prisoners, the word carried weight that changed everything about the mission calculus. How long have they been there? We don't know. Communications intercepts suggest the facility has been operational for several months. Zara studied the map again, this time looking for different details. Guard positions, escape routes, potential landing sites. The mission had just transformed from reconnaissance to potential rescue, and everything about her approach would need to change. The Lightning's engines spooled up with a sound like controlled thunder, their vibration traveling through the aircraft's frame into her bones. Zara ran through the pre-flight checklist with methodical precision, each switch and indicator demanding her complete attention. The cockpit felt different from the simulator, more real, more consequential. Tower, Ghost 1 requesting permission for takeoff. Ghost 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Weather is clear, winds light and variable. Have a safe flight. Safe flight. The phrase carried irony that wasn't lost on her. She was about to penetrate hostile airspace in an aircraft that didn't officially exist, on a mission that would be denied if she were captured or killed. Safety was a relative concept at best. The Lightning lifted off with deceptive gentleness, its massive engines providing thrust that seemed almost effortless. As the wheels left the runway, Zara felt the familiar transformation that came with flight, the moment when she stopped being a ground-bound human and became something else, something that belonged to the sky. Ghost 1 airborne, climbing to flight level 400. Roger, Ghost 1. Proceed on course 95. You are cleared into classified airspace. The aircraft climbed through scattered clouds into the deep blue of high altitude. Below, The American countryside spread out in geometric patterns of fields and roads, a peaceful landscape that seemed impossibly removed from the violence she was flying toward. As she settled into cruise flight, Zara activated the Lightning's advanced sensor suite. Cameras and electronic intelligence gathering equipment came online, beginning the process of mapping the electromagnetic spectrum ahead of her flight path. If there were threats waiting in Romanian airspace, she wanted to know about them long before they knew about her. Ghost One, this is Control. How are you feeling up there? Morrison's voice in her headset carried genuine concern. She could picture him in the operations center, surrounded by monitors showing her aircraft's position and status. Like riding a bicycle, she replied. Except the bicycle costs $200 million and people are trying to shoot it down. Copy that. Your approach to the target area looks good. Maintain current heading and altitude. The miles rolled by beneath her wings, each one taking her further from safety and deeper into uncertainty. The Lightning flew itself for the most part, its sophisticated autopilot making constant micro-adjustments to maintain optimal stealth configuration. But Zara kept her hands on the controls anyway, ready to take manual command the instant something went wrong. Because something always went wrong. That was the first rule of military aviation, learned through blood and experience. Plans were useful until the shooting started, and then survival depended on improvisation, instinct, and luck. The Romanian border appeared on her navigation display as a simple line on a digital map, but crossing it felt like passing through a membrane into a different world. Romanian airspace felt different from the moment she crossed the border, though she couldn't have explained exactly how. The Lightning's passive sensors detected increased radio traffic, radar emissions from military installations, the electronic fingerprints of a nation on high alert, but nothing that directly threatened her aircraft's stealth envelope. Ghost One, Control. You are now in the operational area. Begin descent to reconnaissance altitude. Zara pushed the aircraft into a gradual descent, watching the altimeter unwind as the world below grew larger and more detailed. At 15,000 feet, she could make out individual buildings, vehicles moving along roads, the kind of detail that transformed abstract geography into human reality. Target Valley in sight, she reported, beginning reconnaissance run. The Lightning's cameras zoomed in on the valley floor, high-resolution lenses capturing images with clarity that would have seemed magical just decades earlier. But as the pictures streamed back to Morrison and Ravencroft, Zara found herself looking not at the camera's output, but at the landscape itself, searching for details that technology might miss. The facility was there, exactly where intelligence had indicated. A collection of concrete buildings surrounded by security fencing, with vehicle tracks leading in and out through carefully concealed entrances. But something about the layout bothered her, some detail that didn't match the briefing materials. Control, I'm seeing vehicle movement in the valley. Multiple contacts. Copy, Ghost One. Can you identify vehicle types? Zara adjusted the camera zoom, bringing the moving shapes into sharper focus. Military trucks, definitely Russian design, but their movement patterns seemed wrong for a simple supply run. Looks like a convoy preparing to move out. 6 vehicles, possibly more. They're staging at the facility's main entrance. Any sign of American personnel? She swept the cameras across the facility, looking for anything that might indicate the presence of prisoners or defectors. One of the buildings had what looked like reinforced windows, the kind used in detention facilities. But from 15,000 feet, it was impossible to be certain. Negative on personnel identification, but there are structures consistent with detention facilities. Continue reconnaissance. We need confirmation before. Morrison's transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by the harsh tone of a radar warning receiver. Somewhere below, someone had just painted her aircraft with targeting radar. Control, I'm being tracked. S-300 system has acquired. Impossible. Intelligence indicated minimal SAM coverage. Tell that to the missile battery. That's about to shoot me down. The Lightning's electronic warfare systems activated automatically, flooding the air with jamming signals designed to confuse enemy radar systems. But the lock-on tone continued, and Zara could see the vapor trail of a surface-to-air missile climbing toward her position. Time slowed, the way it always did in combat. Training took over, 15 years of muscle memory compressed into a few seconds of pure instinct. The first missile passed harmlessly through the space where the Lightning had been a heartbeat earlier, Zara's evasive maneuver breaking the radar lock just long enough to spoil the weapon's targeting solution. But she could see 2 more missiles climbing toward her position, their solid fuel motors painting brilliant white trails against the gray sky. Ghost 1 is defensive, multiple SAMs in flight. Ghost 1, recommend you abort and return to base. Negative, Control. There are too many missiles in the air. I need to suppress the threat.